This episode of Liquor and Literature deals with depictions of physical abuse, sexual assault, pedophilia, murder, and genocide. The book being covered also uses offensive terms and stereotypes of Jewish, Black, and Romani people. Although the hosts of this show will be having conversations about these topics, we do not in any way condone acts of violence, sexual assault, or poor treatment of others. Also, cuss words are a part of our regular vocabulary, and drinks will be had. So, keep that in mind if you are sensitive to liquored up loudmouths. Welcome to Liquor and Literature. We are a podcast, book club, and a happy hour. I am Lauren.
I'm Amber.
And I'm Sam.
And basically, every month we just read a book and we kind of just talk about it while we drink some drinks and, do our thing. Also, spoiler alert, there's going to be spoilers because we're talking about a book. Kind of, obvious, but just so people don't get mad at us, there's going to be spoilers.
Spoiler for the movie, too.
Yeah. And spoilers for the movie because we do talk about movie adaptations. So if you want to stop this and read or watch the movie, do that and then come back. Or if you don't care, keep on listening. We don't care. All right. So this month we are doing Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer. And Sam, do you want to tell us what the drink pairing is with this book?
So for this book, I decided on the Zelensky, which is the Ukrainian president's last name, Volodymyr Zelensky. And it's a fairly new cocktail. I saw several different people claiming as they were the ones that made it. So there's a few variations. So the first one that I found was, and I cannot remember her name, so my bad, madam. But she's from Stroud, England, and she was using a vodka that's locally made there called Fuck Putin.
Nice. Aptly named.
Yeah. So I thought that was really funny, but I went with a different variation, and this one is just this beautiful burnt orange color on the bottom, and it's layered with blue curacao on the top and vodka, so it makes this really gorgeous blue layer. And they chose to do it like that because it not only represents the Ukrainian flag, but it also kind of looks like a field of sunflowers underneath a beautiful blue sky, which is the sunflower is the national flower of Ukraine, and it's also a reoccurring kind of imagery that pops up in the movie. So I thought that was kind of a fun little homage. But it basically has, so if you do, I don't even know what the measurements are for one drink. So I can tell you what it is for 3.
Heck yeah.
So for 3, it's 5 fluid ounces of passion fruit puree. It's an ounce of peach schnapps, an ounce of fresh squeezed orange juice, an ounce of lemon juice that's also freshly squeezed, or you can use the stuff that's already done. I'm just fancy schmancy. Then there's 4 fluid ounces of blue curacao and 2.5 ounces of vodka of your choice. I used Kettle One, and then garnish it with just an orange peel or an orange slice or something. But it makes these beautiful layers when you pour the juices and the peach schnapps together and shake it with ice, put it in the glass, and then you stir on ice the vodka and blue curacao, and then just slowly pour that over top to make that layer.
And then when you stir it up,
it kind of looks like algae water, but it's delicious.
It is so good.
Very, very green.
It's so good.
Water. Oh, yeah. We're drinking it right now. It is definitely a summer drink, so,
Yeah.
Actually, any time of your drink, I don't care.
Yeah.
Do we have a sober drink?
Basically, you could do the same thing, but just omit the vodka. The blue curacao is just orange flavored liqueur, if you didn't know that, with dye in it. So it's just already there with orange juice, so you could add a little bit more orange juice. The peach schnapps, you could put peach puree, like some of that nectar that you can find.
The peach nectar.
Yeah, you could put that in it, and it basically would be the same exact thing.
Because we support our sober listeners.
Yes,
Congratulations
we do.
for your sobriety for whatever reason that you are sober. Thank you.
And there are so many non-alcoholic options out there. Like I know at the bar that I work at, we use a brand called Seedlip, and it's gin kind of based. We have one that's called Grove, and it's orangey and kind of herbally, but not too much. So like that would actually probably go really well in there and substitute for vodka.
There we go.
I've definitely heard of that brand before.
Love it.
All right. Well, so Sam, not to make you talk even more, but you were the one that picked this book. So why don't you, first of all, just say why you picked this book, and then second of all, give us kind of like a quick synopsis of the breakdown of what happens, kind of.
Okay, so I picked this book because I randomly saw the movie Adaptation like on a whim, and it became one of my favorite movies just because I have a weird sense of humor, and it's kind of dry in parts, but I find it really funny. And I had never read the book, so I was excited because I was like, oh, this would be great because it has a film adaptation that we can talk about plus the book. Now, that was my bad because there are some things that we're going to talk about later that I was just like, wow, I did not even think that was going to be in there or anything close to that. So there are definitely some surprises for me in store. And I'm an eternal procrastinator, so I'm always the last one to finish the book. And, Lauren and Amber were just like, so about this. And I was like, I don't even know about that yet. Yeah.
I was reading through the book halfway through. I was like, Sam picked this? 3/4 of the way through the book, I was like, Sam didn't fucking read this book.
Yeah. Certainly did not. Well, what's weird too, I guess we could talk about it later, but I remember reading this book whenever I was younger, and I think I just blanked it out of my memory because rereading, I'm like, I do not remember any of this happening, and I feel like I would be disturbed by it if I read it as an 18-year-old or younger when it came out. I mean, I feel like it came out in like 2002. So yeah, I was like in high school. So
I think too, and I know we'll get to this in a second, but I just want to say, I think the way he wrote it, maybe it was kind of subtle because I didn't catch on at first until I remembered what you guys had said. So maybe your brain just didn't pick up on it at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably not. Anyway.
The basic synopsis of the book is basically Jonathan Safran Foer is actually basically kind of writing himself into this book. And he has his grandfather who was saved from Ukraine during World War II. And he's going back and he's basically trying to find this woman that's in his photograph that was with his grandfather that helped save him and escape Ukraine. So he goes to Ukraine and he meets up with this heritage tour company guide, and it's just basically this grandfather and grandson that are his tour guides. Craziness ensues as they go on this search. And it kind of, the book is strangely written because when I first started reading it, I was really not exactly sure what was going on because there's basically 3 storylines. There's the letter between Jonathan and Alex, which is the grandson of the tour guide duo, I guess. And then there's Jonathan's book he's writing, but also Alex's book he's writing. And it's like almost set between their letters. Mm-hmm. So then it just kind of goes through their lives and their search, and even after the search, it's just them writing back and forth these stories. But yeah, that's kind of basically the gist without giving too much away what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, that was a good synopsis, I believe. All right, well, Amber, do you want to kick us off with a history of the author?
Sure. So Jonathan Safran Foer was born February 21st, 1977 in Washington, D.C., to Albert Foer, who is a lawyer and a president at the American Antitrust Institute, and Esther Foer, who is the director and CEO at the 6th and First Historic Synagogue. His maternal grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. When he was 8, he was injured in a classroom chemical incident, which resulted in something like a nervous breakdown over about 3 years and left him wanting to be outside his own skin. Foer attended Princeton, and his professor Joyce Carol Oates took an interest in his writing. He wrote a thesis about his grandfather, Louis Safran, who he had never gotten to meet. He considered for a short time a career in medicine, but decided to pursue a career in writing. He did research in Ukraine to help his thesis further, and eventually turned his thesis into the novel we are discussing today, Everything is Illuminated. He received some prestigious awards for the book, including a Guardian First Book Award and National Jewish Book Award. Currently, Jonathan is living in Brooklyn, New York with his wife, Nicole Krauss, who is also a novelist, and 2 children. He has written at least 13 books. I say at least because I really didn't look that super hard into it. He's got at least 13 of them, though. Good for you, Jonathan.
Didn't you say he wrote Incredibly Loud, or what is it?
Yeah, Incredibly Loud, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. I remember liking that one a lot, but I haven't read it in a while.
He's a brilliant writer.
Yeah.
This book made me uncomfortable in a lot of ways, but it's not for, like, poor writing.
No.
The writing's beautiful.
It's very creative in ways.
Different.
And I think that's what, because I didn't look at the reviews for the book, but most people really liked it, especially when it came out, because it was just not, books weren't written like that kind of back in the early 2000s. I don't think I've ever read
a book that's been written like this. It's very different in style, and I think it's because it varies in style a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Well, speaking of that, why don't we dive into the book? Where do you want to start with that? I feel like the book starts in the modern times.
I think we should go on about how Amber hated this book in the beginning because of Alex.
Let's start off with that.
I just hated his character for a while. And I mean, he's not likable at first. And we all kind of agree, right? He's not a likable guy at first.
I didn't mind him, but I don't know if that's just me being problematic or I just thought he was really funny.
I could tell that he was putting on a facade. I knew that wasn't really him. He was trying to act cool and show off for John Finn, as he called Jonathan.
He kind of came off with this big dick attitude.
Yeah.
Which was, I didn't like it. He's got a big ego. I could tell that he was just, putting on a face. And it was like, why would you put on that face, friend? Nobody likes that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, to him, though, he doesn't know any difference because he's never been to America.
Right.
He's never met an American. Like, he's just going off by stereotypes,
Yeah.
And I think the reason why I like him is because I was already associating him with what I saw in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Which I loved the movie.
The movie, he's way more likable because you're like, he's just goofy, you know?
Yeah.
You're like, I wouldn't take you seriously.
The actor is darling.
Yeah.
And very attractive.
Yes, just darling.
We'll talk about the actor in the movie segment. I have some info on him, so.
More in a deep dive.
I got his number for you, Sam.
Sometimes we go down the rabbit hole and sometimes we're like, no, but Lauren was like, I'll go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
I go down a lot of rabbit holes.
So I liked his progress throughout the book.
Yeah.
So he was a very dislikable character at first for me, but he had a really good character arc, and I kind of figured out why he was kind of putting on that face throughout. And there was a reason. There were several reasons.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Alex is likable. He
grew on you.
Yes, he does. He's like a little wart. He just grows right on you. A likable wart, but a wart.
Yeah. He seems like someone that means well and wants to he's very energetic and wants to be a part of the party. And then as soon as he shows up, you're like, oh, this guy's here. Yeah. You're like you can only tolerate him for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
small
he's here
friend.
again. I think the most entertaining part of Alex's character, though, is all his mistranslations of English sayings.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense because we have a lot of slang in our
idioms
language, and he would just butcher things in a way that made it kind of endearing because it's like, I get what you're trying to say, but you are saying something completely different.
Instead of saying shitting bricks, what was it? Shit the bricks or something?
Oh, okay, so one of the things he says is, It made me a tickled pink person to receive your letter.
Tickled pink. In truth, I was manufacturing a brick wall of shits.
Yeah.
That's what he says.
And then this one, he's like, what was it? Oh, I tried to pull a fast one. What does it mean to pull a fast one? he's like using this verbiage and he has no idea what he's even talking about.
Yeah.
But it's funny.
There's a conversation where when they pick up John Finn, because he calls Jonathan John Finn, from the train, and he says, "Your train ride appeased you?" I asked. "Oh God," he said, 26 hours, fucking unbelievable. This girl, unbelievable, must be very majestic, I thought. Like, literally fucking a girl named Unbelievable. That one cracked me up, so.
I informed them, and I could perceive that I was not selling like pancakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another one I wrote
There's so
down.
many.
Yeah.
There were a lot of really, really good ones.
Talking about the modern time stuff, there's Alex, then there's John Finn, and then Alex's grandfather,
And my favorite.
Sammy Davis Jr. Jr.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that whole, like, group of adventurers and what they're doing. So they pick John Finn up from the train,
Mm-hmm.
and they try to get him into the car with Sammy Davis Jr. Jr., which is,
A dog.
quote, the seeing eye bitch, because Alex's grandfather can't see very well, yet he's the one that's driving them around.
He claims he's blind, but he's not blind at all. Like,
Yeah.
that's the thing. He wears those really super dark glasses, and he drives, and he can see everything, but, like, he just claims he's blind.
Yeah,
'cause he's
because he
old
doesn't
and-
want to do it.
But
Yeah.
it was funny because whenever he tells Jonathan to get into the car, he's like, "Is the driver okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's just blind." And Jonathan's like, "What?"
Yep.
And
Like,
then...
I think he was hoping it was a mistranslation.
I think the interaction between Alex, John Finn, and the grandfather is just very comical a lot.
That was the best part of it.
Specifically, not
Not the
specifically,
best, but-
specifically, the scene when they're trying to go to a restaurant, and John Finn had been traveling all day. He's probably so hungry, and he's like, "I'm a vegetarian," and they just cannot grasp the concept of him being a vegetarian.
They literally asked him what was wrong with him.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And they asked how many times, like, not even sausage? Like, sausage is not a vegetable. Like,
Yeah.
why would you keep asking him? But, I mean, I guess it's a very standard part of their meals there.
Cultural, yeah.
So, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I guess that's probably why they were like, why not?
And this was also written in like the early 2000s, so now I'm sure, you know, there's a lot more vegetarians over in Ukraine and stuff like that. But at the time, they probably were like, "Wait, you don't eat sausage?"
Yeah.
You know?
It was a very comical scene.
Yeah. The way that he wrote it was like all the modern stuff was mostly until the end very comical, and then all the stuff that was written in like the late 1800s or whenever it was,
It varied.
17, yeah.
That
olden
time
times.
period
Like,
varied greatly.
It was
like
written very beautifully and eloquently.
1790 to something.
But
and
that's
then
whenever
it's,
all
the
like the
40s.
yeah, it was written like very beautifully,
1793.
and like the style was different. But that's when all like the heavy stuff I think happened a lot. So who wants to kick off Broad's origin story?
I mean, I guess I can.
Yeah.
So basically, back in, I guess it was before the shtetl or the village even had a name that this takes place in, which is later called Sofiovka. But they decided they didn't actually like that name, the townspeople. But that's what it was actually on the map called. But they decided to use Trakenbrod. And Brod is the river that runs through or by the village. So basically, a wagon was trying to ford the river, and it got overturned, and they ended up finding a baby, and they could not find the wagoner. He was gone, and they decided that it was this guy named Trackham. So they took this child, and they gave it to Yonkel, and he seemed like a really good dad to her. Like,
Yeah.
He was constantly trying to make sure she, like, whenever he brought her home, he's like, "This is the door to your room, and this is my heart. this is my, he kept going through and telling her everything like you do with babies, because that's how they develop a language skill. And it was really cool.
Yeah,
It's maybe why she liked books so much.
I think so too, because she was an avid reader and learner in general, and he really fed that. Even when he couldn't really afford to be buying books and things for her, he did it anyway because he knew she enjoyed it. Sometimes when you just learn too much, you become unhappy with the amount of knowledge you have, because then it's almost like running out, and you're like, well, what if this, or what if that? And it's like, it gets, sometimes too much knowledge is a little depressing. And I think that's really what happened to her, is she just accumulated so much knowledge that she just was kind of depressed.
But I kind of feel the opposite, though, because, like, Yankel never told her exactly the truth about where she came from. Her whole life was kind of a lie, and there's a part where the book's talking about her life, and it says she could never be happy and honest at the same time. And that made me think, okay, well, there's a part of her missing because she doesn't know her actual origin and all that stuff. Right. Even though he was a very caring father. He
was, and I think she always knew that there was a fabrication element to her life. So I think that both of those things probably are true, because knowledge can be very depressing. And if you are a very intelligent person, and it seemed like she was one of the more intelligent people in the shtetl, even at age, 10, somewhere in there. She was little, and she was still one of the most intelligent people in the shtetl. I think the library is named after her. She and
Yankel and
Brod. Yeah. And then there is that other element where he lied to her. There was a point in time where it's way later in the book where it finally talks about, I think it's Kolker, her husband, finally tells her that Yankel was never your real father.
Yeah.
It says, not only was she the smartest citizen in Trachenbrod, called upon to solve difficult problems of mathematics or logic, the well-regarded rabbi once asked her in the dark, which is it, Broad? Talking about the holy word, because in this town they have the upriders, which are very strict Jewish Orthodox, and then there's the slouchers, which are non-believers essentially, or just really loose practitioners of the Jewish faith. And so then it goes on to say, she was also the most lonely and sad. She was a genius of sadness, immersing herself in it, separating its numerous strands, appreciating its subtle nuances. She was a prism through which sadness could be divided into its infinite spectrum. And then the next page, it just basically says, Broad's life was a slow realization that the world was not for her, and that for whatever reason, she would never be happy and honest at the same time. She felt as if she were brimming, always producing and hoarding more love inside her, but there was no release. So I feel like that's kind of how I interpreted it.
Yeah. And I see both.
That's some of that really beautiful writing that I kind of talked about. He's good at writing intricacies of the way people's inner workings work. And it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I have a lot of quotes I highlighted, but they're like paragraphs long. So it's like, but you can't just take snippets of it. Like, you have to read that whole paragraph to get the full feeling of like emotion and everything. I really loved the way that he wrote Broad and Yankel's relationship. I don't know, it just felt like the only, like, the thing about all the old stuff is, since Jonathan wrote it, a lot of it is made up, but that seemed like one of the more authentic parts of it was their relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
I also liked, so Yankel made up a mother for Brode.
Yes. Yeah,
basically the wife that he, I think, kind of hoped that he had. There's a lot of repetition of little phrases in this book. When Yankel's wife leaves, she writes this really simple thing. It just says, the note that she leaves him with literally just says, I had to do it for myself. That's it. That's her Dear John letter. That's her bye-bye friend letter. Like, what the hell is that? That's not even a real
It's like breakup over text.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And so he makes up this wife for himself that died in childbirth. That's what he tells Brode.
Yep.
Is that his wife died giving birth to her. And then there's like this really cute back and forth. So she says, well, was it love at first sight, Yonkel? I loved your mother even before seeing her. It was her smell. Tell me about what she looked like again. Well, she looked like you. She was beautiful with those mismatched eyes like you, one blue, one brown like yours. She had your strong cheekbones and also your soft skin. And so just goes on and on about what she was like, and then tell me again about how she would blow on your face before she kissed you. Well, that was just it. She would blow on my lips before she kissed me like I was some very hot food and she was going to eat me. Well, was she funny? Funnier than me? She was the funniest person in the world, exactly like you. So there's like this really interesting back and forth between them. And then it says, it was inevitable. Yonkel fell in love with his never-wife.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so sad. And he writes these letters from her to him with his left hand so Brode would never know.
Yeah.
And at the end, it's talking about the letter that Brode found, the little snippet that his ex-wife, or whatever you want to call her, left him, that I had to do it for myself. Brode came across that somehow. It was like Yonkel could never get rid of that note. He tried several times and somehow it always ended up back in his possession. And one day she brought it back to him. But there's this repetition of this line by Yonkel. I am not sad. Over and over and over throughout. And it's so sad to read it because you know that he is.
Yonkel, I feel like he wasn't ever mad at his ex-wife. He was just confused about why she left, because she didn't give him any explanation. He has no closure. And the book says that he tried to get rid of that note, but I feel like a part of him never wanted to. So it was just him clinging on to that note, and that's why he made the made-up mom and wife, because he was probably channeling his actual ex-wife, because I liked Yonkel a lot.
I liked Yonkel a lot
Yonkel
too.
and Brode were just a great relation, like the only good relationship I feel like in this entire thing.
Yeah, there was a part when he first received her from the rabbi that I thought was kind of cute, but also kind of weird. And I don't know if it's just because it's what he had, or this is kind of made out to be very fairy tale like. Mm-hmm. But it says he made a crumpled newspaper.
Yeah, I love this.
And a deep baking pan, and gently tucked it in the oven. And first I was like, in the oven, sir? What are you doing? So that she wouldn't be disturbed by the noise of the small falls outside. And he left the door open and would sit for hours and watch her as one might watch a loaf of bread rise. So I liked that imagery, but I was also very concerned because I was like, why is she in the oven?
That's not safe.
I also liked how it would say, whenever he'd take her out, she had newspaper print all over her from the and it said something about that cat. Just kidding. Fat as fuck. You can have him. Or whatever.
Yeah, so there was really cute little things like that in their relationship.
Yeah, it seemed like a good relationship. It was just sad because I feel like it said she never really loved him. They just were comfortable with each other, basically.
I feel like he's the only person that she did love, though.
Yeah.
I felt like that too, but she didn't recognize.
She didn't know what
love really was.
Yeah. Yeah. Which could segue us into Yonkel and Brod jokingly kind of talked about, because she never wanted to, Brod was a very independent person, and she had a lot of suitors because
the whole shtetl was after her.
Yeah. But
at
she
age 9
never wanted to settle with anyone or whatever, and her and Yonkel kind of joked about, oh, well, I won't be able to marry anyone until you pass away.
Yeah.
And go figure,
the day that he died.
She meets her.
Basically, he came in on his, like, he was already dead.
Yeah.
He came in the same night he died.
Yeah.
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 Do we want to segue into the Colker?
Yeah, let's segue into that. That's what I was trying to get at. So, let's get into this.
So somebody else go, because there's a lot there to unpack, and I'll just unpack later.
So I guess the Track and Broad story was also, going back to that, is they had a festival every year on the date that the wagon was overturned, and part of the festival was basically they would have this big parade, and Broad was always the float queen, and then they would throw bags of gold into the river. Well, one bag of gold, and then other ones would be filled with dirt or other debris that would make them sink, and then the men would go and dive, and whoever won the or got the gold bag, like, won or whatever, you know. So the Colker on that given year actually was the one that found the bag of gold, and he was obviously desirous of her, so he followed her to her house, where she had. Do we want to talk about that part?
We should talk about. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because it happens in that same night. I think the series of events is important.
Yeah.
So
she was. She sat and watched the, festivities for a little bit, which ended up turning into basically a whole town orgy at one point. That was weird.
Yeah, that was weird. I forgot about that town orgy part.
Definitely don't want to have a town orgy.
I was like, okay. And she's like, all right, whatever, peace out, I'm done. I'm going to go home and eat pineapple on the roof with the uncle. And at first I was also like, how are they getting fucking pineapple in Ukraine at that point in time?
Good point.
That's something I thought about.
Yeah, I was like, that's weird. But anyway, so she's walking home in her little mermaid outfit, and then
Sofioka.
Yeah.
Sofioka.
I'm never going to say that right. So I'm just going to make a lot of noises. So he comes up to her and starts talking to her, and she's basically putting him off because she just wants to go home, and he's a freaking weirdo. And
he's a super weirdo.
Yeah.
It's not even like a little bit weird.
And they don't call him the Mad Prophet for nothing.
He is off, friends.
Yeah. And he basically starts yelling at her because she says she wants to go home to she wants to go home to her father. And he's like, you're lying. And she has no idea what he's talking about because she's unaware that Yonkel is not her father. And, or at least isn't 100% positive. So then he basically won't leave her alone and ends up raping her. Mm-hmm. And she's like, what, 13 at this time?
Yeah.
12? Yeah. So when the Colker comes to her house, she actually finds Yonkel dead. And the Colker is being a creep at the window.
Yeah, he's outside in the storm, right?
Yeah, so he's getting, like, rained on, and she tells him to go away, and Yonkel's body is, like, at her feet where she found him, and she's naked because she had just gotten raped and took off this costume, and the Colker's like, I'm not going away, not without you. And she's like, well, I'll kill myself. And he's like, well, I'll take your body with me. I'm like, well, that's weird. Okay. But this whole entire thing is just a weird situation. And she basically tells him, okay, but you have to do something for me first.
Then you must do something for me, she said.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to do the direct quote of what?
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Sofiofka was found the next morning, swinging by the neck from the wooden bridge. His severed hands were hanging from strings tied to his feet, and across his chest was written, in Broad's red lipstick, Animal, which was my favorite fucking thing that the Colker did. Thank you for doing that for Broad. That fucking Sofiofka guy was a just terrible human. I don't know that Colker was a whole lot better because, that was a weird way to propose.
Yeah. But you know what? I think he did genuinely love her, though.
I
think he treated her really well even after his accident. Like,
I think he treated her as best he could after his accident.
That's what I meant. Because I was like, wait a minute, that's not. I don't want to say that.
That's not true at all. I think he did the best he could
with his brain
damage.
Yeah. Well, they talk about he talks to her about how he's like, they have like a really good sex life, but they don't really have a conversation. And he is like, we have literally never talked about anything
in 3 years
ever.
we've had 4 conversations.
And she's like, that's
3
okay.
conversations. And she's like, this makes 4.
Yeah. Like she just doesn't want to have that. She doesn't have the connection that she had with Yankel with Kolker. Like it's more of like, okay, well, this is working for me.
But he's so pretty.
You know?
But
yeah, that's I think what that was.
Yeah.
But he's so pretty.
It was a
He
sexual
wants
attraction.
to.
Not
like
else.
he's tries his hardest to like be a smart man for her and get like into her interests and stuff, but she just says no. She shuts it down like every single time.
Yeah.
She doesn't want him for that. You know, that's not gonna meet her needs in any way because he's just not gonna be on the same level, I think, and she's aware of that.
They talk about that, how like she's way smarter than him.
Mm-hmm.
So Kolker and her get married, and he works at the sawmill. And,
which is a death trap.
Yeah,
according to the
apparently
book.
everybody dies
Everyone
at the
dies
sawmill.
in the sawmill.
It's flour mill.
Flour mill.
Flour mill.
Yeah, it's
What?
it's a saw blade, but it's a flour
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That makes sense.
mill.
So yeah, what happens is, let's see, some saw flies off a machine or something and like lodges into Kolker's head, but he is still living, but they can't take it out because if they take it out, he's gonna die. So he like lives the rest of his life with a saw in the middle of his head, which is like very disturbing to picture. But you know what? It is what it is.
One of the first fights that they talk about, which I actually kind of thought
Where's that at?
was funny. It's 127 is the page, and he's like, she's talking to him, and then all of a sudden, oh no, he's talking to the doctor.
Yeah.
And he's like, "You're a fat fuckhead," and the guy's like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "You called me a fuckhead?" He's like, "I'm sorry, you're not a fuckhead. I'm very sorry." And then it continues on, and then he's like, "You're an insolent fuckhead and a fat one too, if I didn't mention it before." And like goes on. And the doctor's like, "Well, these slacks are a little bit tighter on my midsection." He's like, "Fat ass!" Just goes off.
Who do you think you are?
The doctor's like,
Yeah.
"Well, fuck you. I'm not treating you." But it was weird because like it was later after this change had happened. She almost seemed to kind of like relish the abuse.
Yeah.
And I thought that was weird, and I don't know if it's just because it was something completely opposite from what she had received with Yankel, or if she felt she was deserving of it in some way. I didn't
I think she hated herself.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
in a
what
lot
I
of
was
ways.
trying to allude to. I'm like, the fights, I don't know, it was very disturbing to me because, yeah, it made it feel like she wanted it. Like, there's a paragraph about it. I don't know if I want to read it, though.
I know
It's like-
there's one part she said, you know, he's like, "Why the hell can't I remember the name of that coiled instrument?" And she says, "Because of me. It's my fault." So she just
Yeah.
like takes all the
She
stuff
takes all the
on.
blame.
she takes it all on. Yeah.
Well, and there's this thing about the Kolker too, where I really liked that they added this. The Kolker hated himself, or his other self, for it. He would pace the bedroom at night, arguing savagely with his other self at the top of the 2 lungs that they shared, often beating the chests that housed those lungs, or boxing their face. After badly injuring Brode in several night incidents, he decided, against her will, that the doctor with the broken nose was right. They must sleep apart.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then.
Which she was not happy about.
She was
Yeah.
not at all happy about it. She'd rather get the shit kicked out of her every night.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is not... I gotta say, I've got 2 kids at home, and you don't want your kids to see that. But
No.
I'm sure the kids saw that.
Oh, it says it right here.
She was holding one of them, right? When he was like beating her at one point.
Really?
I think so.
Why don't I remember that?
This one, she's not
Read this, like, a month
holding
ago.
the children right now, but it says he beat her in the kitchen in front of the pots and pans in the living room in front of their 2 children and in the pantry in front of the mirror in which they both watched. She never ran from his fists but took them, went to them,
I remember
certain that her
now.
bruises were not marks of violence but violent love. The Kolker was trapped in his body like a love note in an unbreakable bottle whose script never fades or smudges and is never read by the eyes of the intended lover, forced to hurt the one with whom he wanted most to be gentle.
Yeah, did you hear that beautiful writing again?
Yeah. If only I would have read it
I
better.
know.
I was like, blah, blah,
It's
blah.
beautiful writing.
Yeah,
More
I
of that
really
beautiful
like the way
writing.
he writes. I don't know. It's just, ugh.
I like a lot of the way he writes.
Yeah.
It is beautiful.
So, because they have to sleep apart,
There's a glory hole, guys.
they
a
literally make a hole in the wall so they could Have sex through a hole in the wall.
It was initially supposed to be for speaking through, but it's a glory hole.
Yeah,
friends.
It's also like the ancient Snapchat, because they would use it to like basically just look at each other naked or like masturbate for each other as well.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't
Take
just
a peek, I'm naked over
put
here.
your pinky through and do it to it, but like, you know, it was like an all-encompassing kind of thing.
Yeah.
When I was
They had
reading
their third
about,
child through it.
I was reading about them having sex with them. I was like, how did you both did not get splinters? Like, that seems like a splinter-heavy situation.
Especially for him.
That was my concern, too.
I was like, what is going on here? And then the baby that was conceived through the wall, that's the grandfather.
Yeah.
With the...
So they named all their children Yonkel, which isn't confusing at all. That must have been a damn nightmare. Hey, Yonkel, help me in the kitchen. They all fucking come running.
Yep.
Well, I guess you'd just be happy with whatever one showed up.
I guess.
Yeah, at that point.
Dr. Seuss.
Isn't that like George Foreman? Did he name all his kids George?
Well, so apparently he did in the like at the time when we were growing up, but I guess not all of them are George now.
They changed their... I would too.
I don't know if they changed their name or if they're just going by middle names or something. I don't know. But
yeah, I definitely would not. I would change my name for sure. We will definitely talk about that grandfather, but I feel like we should jump back to modern times and talk about the search for Augustine.
Yes.
And Lista. Augustine, well, she's kind of a made-up person because Jonathan doesn't even know if she's actually real, right? Like,
she's real, but they don't know what her
where
role
she actually
was.
is.
Yeah, she was just
her role.
There was a picture of her that he found, and then her name's on the back of it.
Yep, and his grandfather is in the picture, so he
Yes.
assumed that she saved his life.
Yeah. And the whole reason Jonathan wanted to visit there is to find Augustine to learn more about his grandfather.
Yes.
So he goes on this search with Alex and Alex's grandfather and Sammy Davis Jr. to find her.
Yep.
And they find this old lady that they think's Augustine.
Well, they tried to find Trachenbrode for a really long time.
Yes, that's true. I forgot about
They
that. Yeah.
struggled to find this place because it's not on any of the maps. Sofiovka is not really on any of the maps. Kolki is still on the maps, and they found Kolki, and then they kind of traced this to this one little old woman who just kind of lived in a shack with... The way they described it was there were, like, hundreds of clothes and all this stuff on her, like, fence line, and that it looked like lots of people lived there, and she looked very poor. And I remember that Alex talked about how hard it must be for her to raise so many people and take care of so many people. But in reality, what did they find?
Just her.
Just her. She was
Yep.
the only one left.
And the remains.
She just had all of this stuff because she had collected all of the stuff from everyone.
Her retelling of the story is very sad.
It's horrifying.
Because basically, like, the Nazis invaded and murdered everyone, and she was the only survivor, really, right?
There were a few left. And I remember they said you're lucky, and she said yes. No. Yes.
Herschel, we find out from a very sad portion of the book, Alex's grandfather was really good friends with Herschel and Herschel's family. Like, they lived together for a while, right? Mm-hmm. And Herschel and his family were Jewish. And there's a very traumatic scene where the Nazis invade, and they have everyone lined up, and they're like, point out the Jews to us, point out the Jews to us.
They lined up all the Jews in
front
of the synagogue, and they killed most of them.
Most of them, and then they're trying to find the remaining
who here is a Jew.
Yeah. And
they put them actually inside the synagogue and burnt the synagogue.
Yeah.
Is what was happening.
Yes.
And out of, like, Alex's grandfather's not proud of this, but out of fear of his own life, he exposes his friend Herschel and his family, and they end up...
It's just Herschel. He never had a family.
Herschel
because he actually asked Alex's grandfather if he could kiss his wife.
Yeah. So Herschel lived with his family. Yeah.
He was afraid that he would die without ever kissing a woman.
Yes.
But the weird thing, so his grandfather super blames himself for that death, but the reality of it is the Nazis started asking, who is a Jew? And he got to the first guy and he said, no one is left. There are no Jews left.
Yep.
Because they really didn't think there was anyone who was Jewish left in the village.
Nobody knew Herschel very well at all.
Nobody knew him. So the Nazi shot the first guy. And then he went to the second guy and he says, who is a Jew? And he says, please don't shoot me. There's no one left. And he shot the guy and then he got to the grandfather. It was inevitable. Either Grandpa, who was holding his newborn son in his arms, or his wife was, one of the two.
His wife was.
His wife was holding the baby. Either he was going to tell him and live, or he wasn't going to tell him and still die, and no matter what would have happened, Herschel would have died no matter what.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he blamed himself for that death. And it was really tragic to me that he blamed himself so much when it was such an inevitable death. It was a very sad and tragic situation because he loved Herschel. Like, I remember that he was holding his hand, like they were holding hands during the roundup. And you could tell Herschel was scared but found comfort in the grandfather. And the grandfather was glad to provide that comfort, but then it was inevitable. He would have died.
I mean, that's normal psychology to feel guilt where you should not feel guilt. Like, everybody does. I would in that situation. Like, that's a very traumatic situation to be in.
It was horrible.
Yeah, that was a very hard thing to read. So, yeah, they basically, when they meet Lista, and
who we thought was Augustine.
But it's not. But they do find she basically collected all the items from, like, the town, and she had it all in her house. She basically was kind of like a hoarder, and she gave them a box that had a bunch of stuff in it. And when they were going through the boxes, when the grandfather told them the story about Herschel.
Yeah.
This also brings up a theme that I wanted to talk about, which is generational trauma, because there's definitely a lot of that in this book between the grandfather, Alex's father, who they kind of talk about, but not that much, and then Alex.
Yeah.
There's a quote that the grandfather, when he's telling them about Herschel, he says, I am responsible not for Herschel, but for my son, because I held him with so much force that he cried because I loved him so much that I made love impossible. So he's basically saying, because background on Alex's father, he's very abusive and not a loving person. And
he's an alcoholic.
He's an alcoholic. And Alex's grandfather's saying, it's my fault that he's that way because of what happened with Herschel. Because I have so much guilt for what happened with Herschel.
And I think also maybe he probably just spoiled him and gave him everything that he ever wanted just out of pure guilt for what he did. And so he was trying to make his child have a much better life. And sometimes that completely just
goes the wrong way.
Yeah. Makes it go the opposite way.
But I felt like Alex was the break in the chain because he's very protective of his little brother, little Igor.
Yeah.
Little Igor,
I love that name.
Little Igor. And he wants to take care of him. He keeps saving this money up to go to America because he's going to take little Igor with him to America. But then at the very end of the book, he realizes that he's really not going to ever be able to go to America. But he stands up to his dad, and I think he gives him some of that money that he'd saved. And he's like, you need to leave.
Threw like 2 handfuls of money at him, was like basically like, get the fuck out of here and don't come back.
Yeah, he's like, you need to go. I don't want you here anymore. I've got this. You go. And I'm going to take care of the family.
Yeah, he kicks his dad out, which good for you, Alex.
Like crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's why this journey to find Augustine, even though, spoiler alert, they never actually find Augustine, it really, like, she was a metaphor for all of Alex's grandfather, and Jonathan to find some kind of closure for something, you know? And I feel like in Alex's case, he grew up and he got more mature and he realized he didn't need his dad and he became more independent. Back into the olden times.
Yeah.
Way back
Jonathan's grandfather is the one that was conceived through the hole in the wall. Splinters and all. He, when he was younger, had some kind of illness and he had to be separated from...
Oh, he had teeth. Girl.
Oh, he had teeth.
Yes.
Yeah, you
had
get
a mouthful
I knew
of
that he
teeth.
couldn't, like, nurse. So you tell it.
So
'Cause I don't
he was
remember.
born with teeth.
A whole head of teeth.
What kind of freaking baby's born with teeth?
It happens.
A monster baby.
It does happen.
What?
And it's really weird when it does. They
Well,
look freaking
dang.
weird.
I do not like that one bit, and apparently neither did his mom's boobs. So she stopped basically feeding him because obviously he was biting her, and her poor boob was just like, she's like, no, I can't do this no more.
I would just like to say, as a breastfeeding mother, that's fair.
Yeah, it seems pretty awful.
As someone that has never breastfed, I feel like that's fair.
Yeah, exactly, same.
It's not a fun time. Like, when the teeth came out, it was like, either you learn to stop it, or taking
done.
them boobs away.
Yep.
Sorry, my friends.
So, but in this case, she took the boob away and just never gave him any more breast milk. She didn't like try to like,
Yeah.
you know, get any of it out, but she just let it dry up, and so he didn't have enough calcium, and for whatever reason, when he was growing, his arm like was lacking in the calcium it needed, so it was just like, they called it a dead arm. So basically it just was paralyzed, I guess, and didn't have the nutrients.
I'm trying to find exactly the...
Woo, excuse me.
Girl,
That was muffled too.
let's just say this dead arm was causing a stir amongst the ladies.
Yeah, apparently this guy was a womanizer.
But like,
He
Well, he
had...
didn't start off like that because literally... Okay, Amber's got something.
He had 132 mistresses. The quirk was met with the profound happiness of his 132 mistresses, and with relative indifference on his part. How, after all, can one miss something one has never known? Besides, he had never loved any of his lovers. He never confused anything he felt for love. Only one would mean anything to him at all, and a problematic birth made real love impossible. So what should he expect?
okay, can we just stop and say for a second, there is a theme that goes throughout this book of not love.
Yeah.
There is...
Yep. Yep.
Nobody is in love.
No.
Like, this is
Also,
definitely
when
not
he
like this
decides
love
he's
story.
in love...
Yeah.
No, he just came.
Yeah.
He just had an orgasm for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Like, bro, calm down.
Yeah.
You're not in
Yeah.
love.
It was very like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and I honestly, I feel like, you know, I'm not gonna yuck people's yum. If you want to do something with your arm, whatever, I don't care. But the thing that was the most
grandpa arm
disturbing,
dildo?
yeah, if you want to do something with an arm dildo, have a ball.
The fact that they're actually arm dildos is so funny.
The thing that was the most disturbing about this was the fact that he was so young whenever he had his
Yeah,
first like
that was the
sexual quote unquote
terrible,
encounter
terrible
with someone.
part.
He was probably like 10 or something.
Yeah, I think he was
It's like
10.
that ain't right.
And it was like an old woman. Like,
Yeah.
bitch, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, this is disgusting on all fronts.
Yeah.
Like, arm dildo or not. Besides, I mean, you were an old woman, already widowed. He is a 10-year-old boy that has no idea what's even happening.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you?
yeah.
On the day he lost his virginity to Rose, which is the arm dildo situation with the 80-year-old, he was
the
10.
first arm dildo
Yep.
situation.
There was a
First
lot
of
of arm
many.
dildos.
Yeah.
Grandpa has a dead arm. He was 10 years old, and this 80-year-old lady put his dead arm on her lap, stroked it gently, and said some things, and then began going to town on herself with his arm. It was really yucky and inappropriate and unacceptable because, again, he was 10. Yuck.
Yeah.
And no, that's not a yuck in someone's yum because that should not be anybody's yum.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amen, girl. Amber mentioned she wanted to talk about the relationship between, I know this is not a good term, but this is what they said in the book, the gypsy girl. So we need to talk about, you wanted to talk about that relationship.
Well, because it was really interesting to me. I have that quote too. Hold on. So it says, she was a gypsy, he was a Jew. When she held his hand in public, something she knew he hated, he created a reason to need it, to comb his hair, to point at the spot where his great-great-great-grandfather spilled gold coins onto the shore like golden vomit from the sack, and would then insert it in his pocket, ending the situation. You know what I need right now, she said. Tell me anything, and it's yours. Anything. Well, I want a kiss. Well, you can have as many as you want, wherever you want them. Here, she said, putting her index finger on her lips. Now. He gestured to a nearby alley. No, she said. I want a kiss here. She put her finger on her lips. Now. He laughed. Here. He put his finger on his own lips. Now. Here. Now. They laughed together. Nervous laughter, starting with small giggles, stumming, louder laughter, multiplying, even louder, squaring, laughter between gasps, uncontrollable laughter, violent, infinite. I can't. I know. And this is the girl he's supposedly in love with, and it's probably the one time where I was like, this almost seems like love. This almost seems like they actually have a connection and a healthy relationship, other than the fact that he's ashamed to be with her. Yeah. Which is not okay. But it was the closest thing to a love story we got out of him. It seemed like he loved her. They seemed like they cared about each other. And even through all of that, she knew that he really didn't, because he couldn't do what people who love one another actually do. Mm-hmm. And she recognized that, and I think she somewhat accepted it, although she found it hard to accept because I think she did love him. Mm-hmm. And eventually that was a really tragic end for her.
Yeah. Yeah, because she ended up
she killed herself.
Yeah.
I think it's really the imagery that they also made was like, she used the dull knife that she used to carve her messages into the trees to him as, you know, the instrument to kill herself. And I think that actually just says volumes, and it's it's very, very sad.
I really liked the older stories. Lista's story was particularly touching. It was very sad. It was horrifying at times, but I liked it because it seemed like the most honest part of the book to me. Mm-hmm. Like, that seemed like the part that almost certainly did happen in that olden time version. I think, too, that some of the reason that it's so confusing, like, I feel like
too many names are the same.
Well, and I think that Jonathan wrote this in a way that was intentionally confusing with the names. And I think the reason he did that is, if you've ever looked into your genealogy, it gets like that. It gets really confusing trying to figure out who's who and what they did with their lives. And wait, was that my uncle or was that my grandmother? Because their names are or my uncle or my grandfather, because their names are the exact same. What am I doing? Hold on. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of think that he wrote it in that way, because I'm sure when he was going through and trying to get his grandfather's story, it got really confusing for him as well.
Well, I actually did want to bring this up because I was reading articles about him and like his inspiration for this book, and he actually went over there to try to find like history about his family and stuff like that, and he found nothing. Like it was a very like from what he says, it was not like he found anything enlightening or anything. So I think him writing this book was his way of being like, okay, this is what I found, this is my like what's the word,
he's like creating his own story.
And that's probably why the older stuff is so fucked up and weird and almost fairy tale folklore-y, is because it definitely didn't happen, but that's what he wants it to be like, you know? And I feel like, what do you think everything is illuminated actually means? In my opinion, it's that, you know, like, yes, they didn't find Augustine, but Alex, Jonathan, and his grandfather all found closure in some way, or a way to, like, change their lives in a way. And that's how they were illuminated, is because of that. And their interaction with Lista. So that's what I think.
I think I definitely think it's the personal growth that each character goes through, and that's what the illumination is. I mean, there are definitely different types of illumination that's mentioned throughout the book, but I think as a whole, that was the intent.
Yeah. There's like literal illumination of like the fire at the synagogue.
The sex light.
The sex light.
Everybody
which
needs a
was
sex
so
light.
Weird.
I was just like, what is going on here? Why are they seeing it from space? There's not cosmonauts and shit at this point in time.
And then And then the enlightenment from each character.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we kind of covered everything. Is there anything else you guys want to cover before we move on to that movie adaptation?
Can I just say my favorite quote that I really liked from Alex? He's talking with Jonathan, and they're talking about, girls in America. And he's like, what about girls in America? And Jonathan's like, well, what about them? And he's like, they are very informal with their boxes, yes? And you're like, I just could not stop laughing for a second because I'm like, their boxes. you know, of all the things to say for vagina, boxes was
the box. Interesting. Yep.
Since we've been talking about Alex, excuse me.
I was like, who's Alexi?
I am exhausted. Sorry. Since we're talking about Alex. So Lauren and I picked up on maybe there is a possibility that Alex is gay. He says, I'm not a priest, but I'm not John Holmes either. And Alex says, I know of this John Holmes. And he lifts his hands to his sides with the premium penis.
Yeah.
And I had to look it up because I'm like, who the fuck is John Holmes?
I was wondering who that was.
He's a pornographic...
No?
I don't know. He's a pornographic actor.
I was about to say, he's got to be a porn star.
Yeah. With a
that was
very
my assumption.
giant penis, yeah.
So I was
I'm
like...
only into dildo arms, sorry.
My bad.
So that was another, that's a weird thing to... if I was... I know dudes don't talk about stuff like that. It's weird.
Dude, guys love talking about dicks, though.
Yeah,
but not
do. They're obsessed with them. They draw them all the fucking time.
But not about other men's
Yes, they do.
Oh God,
do they?
yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard this.
I feel like...
Yeah.
I feel like, no. Maybe my husband's just, too, abashed by... He's like... Oh.
We're both like...
Yeah.
So then there's one with
same.
his dad.
Yeah, the interaction with his dad.
He's like, oh, are you going to bring, a comrade home? And he's like, no. And
No, I do not love famous nightclubs. He talks about that because that was a big thing that he talked about all the time, was going to the nightclubs and being carnal with a bunch of women. But there's this weird interaction with his dad where it almost seemed like he had been doing those things and saying those things rather to impress his dad. But then it talks about how he really just usually went to the beach by himself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At night, yeah. As I informed you, nobody is aware that I go to the beach at night. And he couldn't understand how Grandpa knew to look for me at the beach. So, to me it was this really weird thing. And it was almost like Grandpa knew that he wasn't doing all these things that he said he was doing. And Grandpa knew exactly where he was. And Grandpa just accepted whatever that meant.
Or maybe he was just more like Grandpa.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, he definitely cannot... he could be gay, he cannot be gay.
Yeah.
It didn't matter either way.
The main thing is that
it just
he was
one of
putting
those...
on a persona that he wasn't. You know?
Most definitely, yeah.
And that's what I got out of it. But there was a little bit of... I picked up that there might be a possibility there.
Yeah,
I mean, I could see it either way.
Yeah, especially the progression of his writing the letters that he was writing to Jonathan. There was a couple times where he said things in there that it could have been a friend thing, but he definitely looked up to Jonathan, and I'm like, did he have a crush on him? He might have.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite quotes, this is a one-line. It's hard to find one-liners in this book, but Alex has the one-liners. I forget what he was writing about to Jonathan, but it was in one of the Jonathan's letters, and it was after everything, I think, that happened with Lisa and everything. And he said, with writing, we have second chances, which I was like, that's really cool, because I feel like that's basically what the author was doing.
Yeah,
you know?
For sure.
I think, too, with this conversation between Alex and Jonathan, I think one of the things that broke my heart the most was when Alex was writing to Jonathan. And he's like, please, there's still time, we can change the ending.
Yeah.
That, broke my heart.
Yeah.
He's like, it's only a few more paragraphs from here. Please, we can still change it.
Mm-hmm. What would you rate this book? I'm interested to know.
Out of what?
Usually it's 5, right?
5?
I don't know.
5 boozes?
5 boozes?
I would say 3 boozes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I enjoyed it. There was some weird parts. But at the same time, it didn't make me want to keep reading through everything else, you know? It didn't make my ADHD go, I must read this all in one setting, you know?
Yeah, you didn't want to power through.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was hard to read. It was hard for me to read it. So for me, writing is 5 out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does have a really nice writing style.
Storyline 3 out of 5.
I'm pretty sure I gave it 3 out of 5 on Goodreads. So we're all around the same.
In agreement.
So 3 out of 5 stalls.
If you read the book, just focus on a lot of the writing because there's a lot of beautiful quotes in it.
Yeah.
The writing style is just something else. It is totally different than anything I've ever read in my life.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, with that, do you want to go on to the movie adaptation?
Fuck yeah!
Fuck yeah!
Can we pause? So I can
Yes.
get a little beer. Burr time.
All right. It is now movie adaptation time.
Woo!
The moment we've all been waiting for, because I feel like most of us like the book, or like the movie more than the book.
Yeah, and the whole reason why we even had to read this book because I liked the movie so much.
Parts and pieces, man.
All right. So, the movie was made in 2005, and it was the directorial debut of Liev Schreiber. Did you know that?
No, I don't. What else has he done?
He's like an action dude. If you saw his face, let me Google. Here we go.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's why I know him. X-Men.
Who's he? I don't watch that.
I think he plays Sabretooth.
Sabretooth.
Yeah.
Wolverine. Okay. Anyway, I probably don't know what I'm talking about. Sabretooth Wolverine. Anyway, so yeah, that was his directorial debut. And the screenplay was written by Liev Schreiber and also the author, Jonathan Safran Foer. Stars Elijah Wood as Jonathan. Alex, the guy who plays Alex, his name is Eugene Hutz. There's a umlaut. H-U umlaut T-Z. Hoots.
Hoots.
Guess who he is?
Who?
He's the lead singer of Go-Go Bordello.
Fuck?
Yeah. So you know how we all watched the movie together, and at the end that purple song came on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's Go-Go Bordello. He's the fucking lead singer, and also the band does a cameo whenever they meet Jonathan at the train, and that like polka band comes up.
Oh my god!
That's Go-Go Bordello.
That's
oh my god!
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so when I was doing this research, I'm like, oh shit, that's the guy!
Yeah.
And that's why the soundtrack's so good too, is because there's some Go-Go Bordello songs in there and everything.
That's just really funny though that we talked about it after we watched the movie.
Yeah.
And you're like, I think this is Go-Go Bordello. And I was
Yeah.
like, I think so
Well,
too.
because I think we were...
I did not make the connection. Because like, it's a band that I've listened to, but not like actively listened to. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, how many times I've watched this movie? Probably one of the most I've ever watched a movie, and I never even knew.
He is a good looking dude, though.
He is a good looking dude. I think we were halfway through the movie and one of us was like, this soundtrack is banging though.
Yeah.
Lauren said she
It was
had
good.
listened to it while she was reading the book, and I was like, you know what? This is a really good
Look at this
soundtrack.
guy. He's an
Yes.
attractive fellow.
Even like that.
He's
With
he's
that
a
mustache.
The mustachio.
Oh.
Well, Amber can't see it.
I'm gonna
but
have to.
scoot your boot over.
See,
Oh, I like
is
this
all
one.
me right there.
This
I love
picture
that.
right
Oh,
here.
oh,
Oh,
oh.
yeah. Look, he's got a gold tooth.
What? Oh, actually, he
Oh,
is in the movie
he
too.
actually have a gold tooth?
Yeah, he
I
has
just
one
in the
assumed
movie.
that was a like movie thing.
I need to see if
Yeah.
he's been in anything else. I don't think he's really acted that much other than
But he
this.
should, because he did a really good job.
He did do a great job.
Yeah,
My
that's
God,
why I
why was
shocked.
he so fucking good looking in some of those pictures? That's just rude.
Yeah, look at that. That's
Yeah,
him.
he's a cute guy.
All right, so IMDb. I love IMDb. They give it a 7.4 out of 10 rating. So the book was highly rated and also the movie was highly rated.
The movie more so than the book, I would say. The book is like medium, and then the movie is like medium well.
So, what made you guys like the movie so much? Do tell.
I think they just really focused on the humorous parts of the book, which I think really helped the storyline along for people that have never read the book to like understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. Because they just follow the modern story. And I think that's, for a movie that was a really, really good adaptation, because the bouncing back and forth does get really confusing.
It does. They focused heavily on the humor and just kind of the journey of getting there in the first place to where they needed to be. And then when they got there, the story wasn't quite as sad. Mm-hmm. It was sad.
Yeah.
It was sad, but they changed the ending.
They changed a lot about basically the end of Trachtenberg. Oh my God.
Trachtenberg.
Yeah. There's been beers.
Beers have been had.
And then now I cannot talk. But yeah, I think that was drastically changed. And that's obviously just to suit viewers.
The book's end.
It's terrible and beautiful.
Oh.
It is. It's beautiful.
I felt so sad after finishing the book. I think I told you guys, I need to reread the last 2 chapters because there was a lot that happened and it was all very depressing and I just need to reread it.
You sounded like that one chapter just now that didn't have any commas or periods.
We are writing.
Yeah.
15 million times.
Yeah, I was like, I get it.
Yeah, I was like, okay, that literally says all the same things. Scan through. Okay, yep. Skip the page.
Same thing.
Yep. Yeah, same. I will say, I was the only one of the 3 of us that liked the book more than the movie, and it is because they didn't do any of the backstory.
It wasn't that I didn't like. Okay. I liked the movie better than the book in the way that things were presented as far as modern goes.
Yeah.
I liked the book better than the movie in the sense that they did a better job with the ending.
Yes.
I did struggle with some of we didn't go back. There were some stories that didn't need revisited. There were some stories that I would have liked to have seen portrayed in the Hollywood film. However, I think they did a pretty damn good job for what they did do. It was a different interpretation. It was an interesting interpretation. Mm-hmm. It was beautiful standalone. The book's not so beautiful standalone. It is, but it isn't.
Like, I get why they didn't.
It's ugly beautiful.
I get why they didn't go back and do the older stuff, but they could have at least touched on Brod and Yonkel's story. Like, that's the one I wanted the most. They didn't have to do the dildo arm, and if they did, it would have been NC-17.
Yeah. Yeah,
I get why they didn't do that, but like they could have at least
done some of those relationships, and that's what I wanted to see. That's what I was hoping to see was that part, and was like,
because
you
like
can
you
cut
said,
out all that other bullshit.
I felt disconnected with Lista, and like then when the grandfather killed himself, I was like, yes, that was sad, but it was very jarring and like, what the fuck, like.
Well, like in the movie, they made Lista out to be Augustine.
Yeah.
So, like, in the book, Augustine, they never meet Augustine. They never find her. They don't know her story. Lisa doesn't know her, or she says she doesn't know her. She may, but, like, you don't know. But in the movie, she is Augustine. And I think, you know, there begins that kind of disconnect from the book. Because, like, after that point, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the book that just isn't in the movie.
I think I'm just missing the emotion in the movie. Like, yeah, it had the comedy, and they were going for the comedy, but the sad parts weren't as sad as the sad parts in the book. No. And I was just sitting there being like, I should be more sad right now, but I'm not, because I don't have the backstory that I should be having because of the book.
Yeah.
And I think they also really shortened when... in the movie, Augustine / Lista is basically telling the story that is Alex's grandfather's story, you know, from the town. And his name was originally Eli. Mm-hmm. And he obviously changed it once he escaped and moved to Odessa. But in the movie, it is such a short little blurb. It leaves you confused. Because you're like,
I was confused.
Who's doing what here?
Yeah.
Like, did he rat someone out to the Germans? Which, I mean, I guess technically he did, but like in the movie, it seems like he did it almost willingly and not like a forceful kind of way that actually happened in the book.
Well, and also in the movie, it kind of made him seem like
he was the victim.
He was the victim. He was one of the Jewish people that,
yeah,
like, got away.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, like, yeah, going back to grandfather's death, like, it was also abrupt in the book because it was basically like Alex writing to Jonathan being like, this is what happened. And you're like, whoa! But it had a lot more backstory. And because of the grandpa's backstory and because of the letter that Alex wrote, you're like, okay, I get it. But in the book, you're like, why would he do that? Like, It doesn't have any kind of, not relevance, but it's just like, whoa, okay. Yeah. Like another sad thing that doesn't have any connection to the rest of everything.
Yeah, like they're winding down the movie and all of a sudden there's like this cut scene where he has, killed himself in the bathtub at the hotel after they met Augustine, which is not what happened in the book at all.
No, he was at home.
And it's just like, oh, okay. Well, that doesn't make any sense. But and then they just went home without him. Like, I don't know. But, yeah.
I liked them separately.
Yeah. Together, it's not right. But separately, like if I would have watched the movie like you did way back when, I'd probably have been like, oh, that was interesting. Oh, I liked it, And then read the book and be like, whoa, this is way different,
Yeah.
So,
it was definitely a little bit of shock. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. Ring back the dildo alarm! I'm going to write a petition.
Was very unexpected.
Again. Sam chose this? Sam didn't read this.
Sam's pretty eccentric and she has an interesting taste, but damn. No,
you know what, though? I probably still would have suggested it had I read that.
I'm glad that we covered this book.
Very much me.
Because it's a different thing and I like, revisiting it because, like I said, I completely blocked it out of my memory from whenever I was younger. So, and also if I hadn't, you still have a different perspective from whenever you're like,
most definitely.
In your 30s or whatever. So I have a question. Do you think if this book came out now, it would have the same reception as it did back in like the early 2000s? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Like it came out like it had like people loved this book. And I'm like, yeah, it was interesting, but I'm not on board of like loving this book. And I feel like now, it definitely wouldn't. It doesn't age as well as. I mean, there's definitely worse books in writing that have not aged as well. But I just, I don't know.
I just feel like people would get way too wrapped up in what's not PC about this book.
Yeah.
And I think that would ruin it for them instead of just accepting it as it is.
Yeah.
And going with it.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I mean, there is a lot of things that aren't PC about this book, but it's also. You have to take everything for what it is, not what is now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that gets lost a lot. It's like, just because it's unacceptable, and it is, doesn't mean that this doesn't have value.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or in the case of the changing time frames, just because it's unacceptable now doesn't mean it was unacceptable then. Like, and I think that's something that we just have to kind of keep in our mind as we do this.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Which, I mean, kind of goes against who we are as people in a lot of these instances. But, it just...
Well, definitely. A lot of the books
change.
that we're going to read are going to have things that are cringy about them because they were written a long time ago. And I'm not going to rant about this. I have ranted about this. And I am all about cancel culture, but there's a point where it's like, well, sometimes canceling all this stuff is harming it. Like, you could watch a Pepe Le Pew cartoon and tell your kids that's not right.
Yeah.
But still let them see it and realize that's not right. It could be a learning experience rather than like, we're not even going to talk about this. Because if you don't talk about it, that you're missing out on a learning experience.
Right.
Yep. I agree with that.
That's all I'm going to say because I could rant about this forever. But, like... we're going to come across that a lot, I think, in this podcast. And that's also why we have disclaimers on every freaking episode because we talk about a lot of stuff like that.
Well, yeah, if you cancel too much, then it takes away everything.
Yeah.
This book alone, if they wanted to play the cancel culture card, could be canceled for pedophilia.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it is the most horrifying part of this book for me. That was the strongest, most disliked part of this book for me.
Yeah.
But... that does not mean that this book did not have some value. There was a lot of value in this book. So
cool. Well, on a lighter note, I have a couple fun facts.
Yeah.
We like fun facts.
So one fun fact is apparently there's a play adaptation
Oh.
of this.
Are we all going?
I didn't read that many articles about it, but I don't think that it was very
It wasn't
well
good.
received.
well received. I don't know.
Okay.
It's like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Like how, like if they had trouble putting the book to a movie, how are they gonna put the movie to a play? Like, whatever. I'm gonna get off my film nerd thing. Anyway, so that was the first fun fact. Second fun fact. Did you know that Natalie Portman used to be besties with Jonathan Safran Foer because she read Everything is Illuminated and liked it a lot. So they started this email correspondence where they probably met sometimes, but they were just emailing each other a lot. So I stumbled upon this New York Times article.
Natalie Portman is...
I fucking love
I
Natalie
do
Portman.
too. She's such a, like, interesting person.
And I can't see it now because I clicked on it too many times. But it's basically like New York Times came out with this very lengthy article that is all about the emails of Natalie Portman and Jonathan Safran Foer and how he ended up having a crush on her because of these email correspondences.
Aww.
And then he divorced his wife to be with her, and she was like, "No, that was a friendship. I'm sorry." So I have the article. I will put it in the show notes. I did not read it because I did not have fucking time to read a bunch of emails between Natalie and Jonathan.
Whoa, buddy.
But
sounds like a pretty big misstep.
Yeah, I have an article.
That's what happens when you assume.
I'm telling you, though, I get it. Natalie Portman. I fucking love her. But I do have an article from Vex that I wanted to kind of read, the Cliff Notes version of what happened. And interrupt me if you want to say anything. It reads, Portman has apparently been a fan of Foer's since he published his first novel, Everything is Illuminated, in 2002, and they began an email correspondence not long afterward. When Foer published his case against eating meat with eating animals, Portman wrote an op-ed for the Huffman Post about how the book convinced her to become a vegan. She signed on to produce a documentary based on the book, and somewhere along the way, per the rumors carefully outlined by A.J. Delurio at Radar, Foer decided that he and Portman were in love.
Oh, buddy.
According to Deluro, Foer told his wife, the acclaimed novelist Nicole Cross, which I think you said that they were still married, but
that's what I got in the article I read.
Maybe that
apparently
was...
not.
Maybe
Unless they got married again.
When you said that, I was like,
Or he was like, JK, I'm calling off the divorce. You still want to, like, hang? Like, I don't know.
I'm looking it up now.
Foer told his wife, the acclaimed novelist Nicole Cross, that he was in love with a beautiful and intellectual movie star. He did not check with Portman to find out if she was on the same page, but more or less took it as fact that, of course, they were meant to be. He and Cross divorced. But Portman, who is married to her Black Swan co-star Benjamin Millepied, is that right?
Millipede?
Millipede? Millepied.
Millipede.
Millipede. Had no interest in ending her own marriage to run away with Foer. When he finally approached her, the story goes, she told him so. None of this sort of backstory is mentioned in the T Magazine emails, which are mostly limited to musings on guinea pigs and melancholy of specifically Jewish nature, but as the cut points out, they are the kind of emails, quote, that one might pen if one wanted to convince a very famous and beautiful actress to leave her husband for you, unquote. Which is to say, performatively, intellectual, and intense. It may seem like a sad story, but personally, I aspire to achieve the level of unearned romantic confidence that allows me to just assume that a famous and famously good-looking movie star obviously would want to end her marriage to be with me. It certainly seems to have worked out all right for Foer, who is currently dating Michelle Williams.
Oh.
And this was in 2016, so...
yeah, their marriage ended in 2014. Sorry for the misinformation, friends.
Yeah, when he said that, like, wait a second.
Fucking oops.
So I will include both the very lengthy New York Times article, if you want to read it, and that article in the show notes. But hey, you know what? I would do the same thing with Natalie Portman.
I would just...
Jonathan. I understand, Jonathan. I understand.
I would do it with Eugene.
I would get cordial with her. No.
I would just like to say that he assumed that Natalie Portman was in love with him, and I assumed that the reference I got my information from was current.
We all make mistakes,
So
Jonathan.
sorry, guys.
It's okay.
Did you just call him Jonathan?
Jonathan! It's okay. We all make mistakes. And with that, I think we're going to conclude our episode on Everything is Illuminated. Thank you for listening. And if you did not hear that, that was Amber taking off her bra.
Just ripping it from her chest.
All right.
Done with that?
Until next time. See you later.
Bye.
Audio engineering, logo creation, and social media content was produced by Lauren Ranney with Ranney Film and Video. Stock music tracks have been provided by Motion Array. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at Liquor&Literature Podcast, where you can dive into more details about the books, authors, and movies we cover. You can find all of our episodes at liquorliteraturepodcast.podbean.com. Until next time, keep the pages turning and the drinks flowing.